Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're listening to me. It's great to have you here on Leanne On Demand Daily. I'm sat for a walk on a track, actually, it's almost foresty. There's kangaroos and probably hear some wildlife in the background. At the Corporate Box on Friday, had a good chat to Sophia and Jade around the topic of niching. And I have a few different perspectives. This topic of whether you should have a niche, if you're looking at starting your own business, creating content, going down that route, like, do you need a niche? And I definitely think it's context dependent. I also think it depends on where you are in your journey as well. So I just wanted to provide not a solution for you, but just maybe some ideas, some questions, some prompts to think about. And this is really just based on my perspective and my journey. I do think there are various perspectives, and it really depends on how you like to work as well. I think, though, what we got to understand is if you're looking at using a niche to create a business, what every business needs to do is it needs to solve a problem. And these can be specific problems or it could be general problems. When you look at a niche, you're looking at being really specific on the problem you solve. So with my book, The 2-Hour Workshop Blueprint, that was about solving a very, very specific problem, which is, how do I run a 2-hour workshop? And I actually got that idea from a couple of different areas. One, I love Nick Gray's book, The 2-Hour Cocktail Party. I love how he just focused in on hyper niching on this is a 2-hour event and here's how you run it. But also secondary, in my group, The Flip Chart, I was doing a search on what questions people were asking in that group. Oh, if you don't know, by the way, I've got this group called The Flip Chart. There's about 2,800 facilitators or people who run workshops from all over the world in there sharing their tips. 2-Hour Workshop Blueprint was like a hyper niche. Not only how do you run a workshop, there's a lot of competitors in that space of just like workshop design and learning design. I didn't want to be caught up in that. And so I hyper niche it to a 2-hour workshop. If you have read the book, in the opening, it's like, hey, some of the lessons here you can apply to multi-day workshops, 1-hour sessions, but this is the recipe and the formula, the blueprint for a 2-hour workshop. That's a hyper niche, but it isn't the only problem that I ever solve. Like, can you imagine if my life was just helping people run 2-hour workshops and only running 2-hour workshops? Some people might find that really good. No, not for me. And in that flip chart group, I did do a poll and I asked, hey, do you view yourself as a multi-potentialite? If you haven't seen that TED talk, I'll link to it in the show notes. It's a really great talk about how, as humans, we have a variety of skills and things we want to offer. And sometimes we get bored with just doing the one thing. And interestingly enough, it's a group of facilitators. I would say 95% of people voted, yeah, I view myself as a multi-potentialite. So it can be a really challenging question when you think around, what is my forever home? What I'm always going to talk about. And the good news is you don't need a forever home. Unless, and this is where the context comes in, unless you are someone who wakes up every morning and you are obsessed, say, with beekeeping and you cannot stop thinking about it. You love it. You love drilling into detail. You love getting into depth on this. You want to be the ultimate expert on beekeeping and that's your life's purpose, then go for it. This episode really isn't for you if you have that level of clarity. I've discovered that a lot of people that are talented in many different areas and enjoy many different things just struggle every day on this question of niche. So here's how I've consolidated with myself and I've gone through this journey. First of all, I actually did niche down when I kicked off. And most of you still know me. I would say a lot of people still know me from Leanne 1.0, which was the first time facilitator podcast. And that was all about workshop design, creating workshop experiences. And it was run out of a real need. I was solving a problem. The problem was my boss at the time was sending me all around the world to run leadership programs and workshops internally. And I had no idea how to do it. And I made a few mistakes. Of course, I still continue to make mistakes. And that podcast was there because I was like, okay, I'm trying to find some podcasts about this. And there was nothing back in 2017 about workshop design. So scratching a real itch, solving a real unique problem. And that in 2017 allowed me to really build an audience and build my brand. So that was a hyper niche thing, right? It was workshop design for newbies. Specific, you know what it is when you hear it, I understand what that is. Now as I evolve, I'm kind of in the space where I still enjoy doing a lot of the workshop design. Of course, I still love running workshops, but I don't want to be known as like the workshop girl. And where I'm spending my attention all the time is like, okay, I'm still known as this because what is my next new thing? I created a Substack late last year called Leanne's Next Book. I'm going to keep that domain, by the way, because I think there will always be a next book. And I was using that as a platform to sort of write, and I was getting a bit stuck, to be honest. Hence why I've got this podcast this year and why the title itself is actually pretty vague. It's called Leanne On Demand. And I'm really going in on this concept of you are the niche. In the world that we're in now, people connect with people. They don't connect with corporations or companies or even necessarily a topic. And it's a really interesting way of approaching it. So how I'm thinking of my business now is leannehughes.com. That's me. That's my personal brand. I am the niche. That is my parent company. But I won't be going around selling the book on Leanne Hughes or it's like the Book of Mormon or anything like that. Like what I end up doing to niche down and to provide an offer that is monetized is actually then doing the hyper niche. So writing a book on the 2-hour workshop blueprint was a hyper niche. I ran a masterclass the other day around creating wildcard options in your proposals. I do something called thought breeder sessions. So these are like niches based on specific pain points, problems that I've seen within various audiences. Having the parent company and viewing myself as the brand allows me so much creative freedom. And I've really enjoyed actually just doing this podcast every day as a creative outlet to just get what's on my mind out there or just have it as an opportunity, as a platform to speak to people and record some really great chats and ideas and concepts. I mean, I was really surprised myself. I did an episode around Luke Combs. I did an episode around that song, Your Woman. Like, this is weird. Some scams in Thailand. Like, these are not traditional topics. But I also see this podcast as more of a brand building exercise, a trust building exercise, a creative outlet versus something I need to monetize for my business. At the moment, my business is, I would say, 90% working with B2B, working with organizations, helping their leadership teams out, coming in, hosting conferences, sparking ideas that way. I still do a lot of help with like the learning design and workshop design, as well as building internal marketing capability. So getting attention and attraction for your ideas within an organization and leading change that way. And then the other 10% is B2C, as Alan Weiss would call my retail audience, which are things like the red carpet camp out and the occasional masterclass and things that I'll run online as well. So there's probably pros and cons of these approaches. I think the pro is I get to be creative and go where my energy is going and what I'm interested in and curious around. But at the same time, it's like, it's a business. It's not a hobby. So I always have to go back to that question that Alan Weiss, I've replayed a ton of our interviews together on this podcast. But the real question is, how are you improving the client's condition? So I think that's where I would start. If you're uncertain, if you've got multiple interests like I do, multiple things fascinate you, maybe start with thinking of yourself as a brand. Dan Koh talks about having 3 content pillars. So if you haven't followed his work, Dan Koh talks a lot about the creator economy. And he has a course called the 2-Hour Writer. But he talks about 3 content pillars. I think he talks about health, wealth, and philosophy. And those are like his 3 things. So I think it's a nice way to start. It's like, okay, see yourself as the umbrella brand. What are some like core pillars for you? And that's a nice way to kick it off. Then if you want to monetize or create a lead magnet, so to get people to sign up to your email list in exchange for something free, then I'd go into really hyper niching it and trying to solve a very specific problem. A real problem, people that want to fix. Because there's the other thing, like we think there are problems around, but people won't actually pay to solve them. So what is the problem? And they always talk about, are you selling the vitamin or are you selling Panadol? People will have more of a propensity to buy or be interested when they wake up, they've got a headache. They're like, Leanne, I need this product to help solve what I'm working through. Hey, no, by the way, I didn't really talk about passion here. And that's because I don't really think I'm amazingly passionate about anything, to be honest. I think passion comes later. I think passion is a result of competency. So actually, the more you drill into something. So with workshop design, I wasn't passionate about it when I started the first time facilitate a podcast. I was almost frustrated by it because I wasn't that good at it. But after a while, I developed this passion because I was having conversations around it. It was self-reinforcing. I was trying things out. I was building an audience. This created the passion around it too. So if you are sort of at the hesitation station about what is my passion, I think that the best advice that I read was from Jenny Blake in her book, Pivot. She has this framework for pivoting. And one of the stages is to pilot. And her analogy is, imagine that you've got these things out, these projects you're working on, They're like racehorses. You open the gates and you see which one takes off, and that's the one you go for. So even this podcast, sharing different things, sharing different content ideas. I do the same thing on LinkedIn. I view it as an experiment. It's all about just seeing which of these horses will take off, what fuels me, what is of service to the market and the community as well. Cool. I'll speak to you tomorrow.